So what are we looking at? What are your keys to success? If you think someday, at some point, I may want to have my own practice in whatever field that you might currently be in, a couple of things. Number one is, when do I get started? How do I get started? Number two is, you need to understand the money, and we'll get more into that. Number three is understanding planning. And number four, you need to understand that health is a business, right? And we'll talk about each of these in turns. So number one, when do I start? You could start planning now, right? You're here, you might go to some other seminars, you might sit in on some other classes. So in effect, this is one step in getting started. More specifically though, you probably want to start thinking about what you need to do at least 6 months before you leave your residency or your degree program or your current position if you happen to already have a position somewhere. So you want to plan on at least 6 months, and that would include all of the credentialing that you might have to go through for a health-related business, right? And as I go through, if you have any questions, please stop me, and I'll be happy to try and answer any questions that you have. So when we talk about money, there are a couple of things in particular that we want to focus on. Number one is, how much do I need to start? Realize how much you're going to need, because one of the first things that you do is you start making a list. And it's a list of everything I would need in order to open my practice the first day. Now, of course, I mentioned medical equipment, but you also need computer systems. You need all of the software. You need furniture in the waiting room. You need credit card reading machines. You need office supplies, paper. You need printers. You need pencils and pens. And you would just be amazed at how much all of these things add up. So the first thing that you want to do when you think about how much money do I need to start is you start making a list. I mean, you can go, if whatever type of practice you'd like to start, go visit an office that is that type of practice and start writing things down. Everything that you see in there is everything that you will have to buy initially to get started. All right? Plan on, if you need medical equipment and things like that, right, you're talking at least $500,000 or more, depending on the type of practice and how large you want it to be. Right? Where do you get $500,000 from or more? Wells Fargo? Wells Fargo, so I could go to a bank, perhaps, and get a loan. Yes? Friends? Right? So there's what we call love money. It's friends and family, and they give it to you because they love you, right? So there's that. There's your own personal savings. I know the students that I deal with in the business school, I keep hearing a constant refrain of how much student loan debt they have. I have a daughter who goes to school here. She's in political science, and she has student loan debt. I would imagine, given my limited understanding, that in medical school you can rack up considerable student loan debt. However, I used to be, in a career a long time ago, a commercial lender at a bank. And so I would be the person that you would come to see. Yeah, you probably have to have at least $100,000 of your own money for me to give you the loan for the rest. Right? You have to have what we would call skin in the game. You have to have some risk of your own in this. Because of course, if you're risking somebody else's money, well, if things aren't working out or it's more difficult than you thought, then it's easy to turn around and walk away. It's not my money, right? So we're looking for you to have some of your money in there because then it's harder for you to turn around and walk away. All right? The bank doesn't want to lose money. Certainly you don't want to lose money. We want to partner with you. And so bank is the typical way that you would go. But realize that you need to have some capital invested as well. They're not going to lend you the entire amount that you need. Oh, yeah, please.
Are there any type of restrictions with it being a health system on what type of investors you can have invest in you?
That's a good question. So that is going to vary. Well, so there are investors and there are lenders. Right? And so the difference is if I lend you money, you have to pay it back. Right? So you have to pay it back plus interest, like a car loan.
Right.
An investor is somebody, they give you money and you don't need to give it back, but they get a percentage ownership of your business. My guess would be that that is going to vary by state. All right? In kind of preparing for this, I did notice that there's a lot of variance in state guidelines, state regulations, state rules in terms of starting different practices. What kind of licensing is required and that sort of thing. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's going to vary as well. So whatever state you want to operate in, I would contact whatever the state medical association, and they could probably give you the specific guidelines.
Okay, and then just to follow up with that, I don't know if you're going to touch on this with past money, but the practices you interviewed and talked to, were they more like S Corp, C Corp?
I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
Yes. Historically, medical, dental practices, lawyers would, their legal structure would be an LLC, but now a lot of them use S Corps. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is. So money issue number 2, do I understand finances? This right here is the #1 reason that new ventures fail. The owner doesn't understand the finances, right? So for example, if you're starting a business, how important is profit?
Bottom line.
Bottom line, right? Profit's the most important thing, yes? Yes, no. Profit's not the most important thing. In fact, theoretically, you can operate forever and lose money every year. There's a whole industry dedicated to that. That's the biotech industry. Right? The most important financial consideration for any new business is cash flow. That's how much money, cash, not sales, because we know if I make a sale today but I don't get paid until next month, that's a sale, but that's not cash in my hand. Right? So cash flow is how much cash came in this month, how much cash went out this month, and is that positive or negative? Because if it's positive, that means I can pay all of my bills this month. I can pay my employees this month. I can pay myself this month. Sales are different because you might make a sale today. In a typical business, you might make a sale on credit, and next month you'll get paid. I worked for a company that made auto parts, so kind of far away from a medical practice, but their biggest customer was General Motors. General Motors paid on the last Tuesday of the following month from when you invoice them. So if I give GM parts on February 1st, that I've already paid for the materials, I've already paid to make them, I've paid to ship them, GM gets them February 1st, I get paid the last Tuesday in March. That's almost 2 months later. So I have to carry that cost for 2 months. In addition to that, typically GM would pay us for about 75% of the invoice because they'd say, well, your account is wrong or some of these parts are wrong. And so part of that bill would be carried over for 3 months or 4 months. And suddenly, even though it's billed as a sale in February, you're not getting some of that money until June and July. It's hard to pay bills with sales, right? You need to have cash. So you need to make sure that you're turning over cash not letting accounts receivable kind of float out there. You need to collect cash as soon as you can, because that's how you pay your bills. That is a common misunderstanding that entrepreneurs have, right? They think, I'm making a profit, why can't I pay the bills? In fact, the part company that I worked for outside of Philadelphia, they went bankrupt because the owner, who had an engineering background, wouldn't listen to me and the accountant, who said, you don't have the cash to do this. He had purchased the company all with debt, so he had high debt payments every month. On paper, he was earning industry average profit, about 2%. But in terms of cash, he wasn't bringing in enough cash each month to pay his bills, and he went bankrupt. So I can make industry average profit on paper and still go bankrupt because I don't have enough cash. There's also your income statement. That's where you find out what my accounting profit is, right? And your balance sheet, that tells you the extent that you have assets, liabilities, who owns what equity in the company. Not understanding this is the number one reason ventures go under, the number one reason they fail. So for you, especially if you've never dealt with anything like this, at some point, you need to at least have a working knowledge of it. It doesn't mean you need to put all of the numbers together. It does mean that when your accountant presents you with the numbers, you know what they mean. All right? Because that's going to be the basis on which you make a lot of strategic decisions. The second biggest problem entrepreneurs have are planning issues. And here are the different planning issues that you're going to run into. Number one are the necessary legalities, things that legally you have to get taken care of before you can actually start your business or your practice. For you, the big thing is credentialing, right? You have to get your degree, you have to get your professional licenses, there are federal licenses, there are state licenses, there are different credentials that you have to get depending on what your area of health is and what state you're in, because states vary widely in the credentials and licenses that are required. And of course, there are also federal requirements. Second, if you open your practice, you have to get, and a lot of entrepreneurs either don't know or totally forget, you have to get a tax ID number from the federal government so that you can pay taxes to the government, which is kind of important. The government doesn't like it if you don't pay taxes. You have to get insurance, both business and professional insurance. And this again will vary by state, what's required and what you can get beyond what's required. Lastly, as we mentioned, is the legal structure. Historically, groups who got together to form a practice, be they health practitioners or lawyers typically, you would form a limited liability company, an LLC. In the last probably 10 to 20 years, a lot of these groups have decided to form S-Corps, an S-Corporation. There are a variety of kinds of corporations you can form. There's a C-Corp, that's what you would think of like IBM and Google, those are C-Corps. And S-Corp is a little bit different because it does two things. If you incorporate, it gives you limited liability. So typically, a company that is an S-Corp, if they have difficulty with a customer or a supplier and they were sued, you're actually suing the company, not the individual. So you have limited liability. And that's critically important for especially you, right? And S-Corp gives you that limited protection. So people are suing your company, not you personally. The benefit of an S-Corp is that any income is actually taxed at the individual level, not the corporate level, for those who own the company. So if, for example, you and 2 other people open a practice, right? Any profit from the practice that's distributed to each of you is taxed at the individual tax rate. In a C Corp, what happens is any profit is taxed at the corporate tax rate. Then you get the profit distributions if you're the owner, and then you're taxed again personally on it. So the S Corp actually saves you a lot of tax money. You don't have to pay corporate taxes at the corporate level. It's only taxes for you at the individual level. But you also get limited liability protection. So I recommend to virtually all of my students, and that would include you, if you were going to start a venture, you would want to incorporate it as an S Corp. You can always change your mind later and change how it's legally structured, but that's typically what I start with as a recommendation. Second is a business plan. Now, a lot of people think, oh geez, I don't need a business plan. A business plan is something that you write and then you stick it on a shelf and it gathers dust. Well, it can if that's what you allow it to do. But the business plan is really written for 2 different reasons, right? Or for 2 different groups. One is you and your team. And a business plan forces you to think through every aspect of what you want to start. And we'll talk about the different components of the business plan, because these are all things that you would need to consider if you're going to start your venture, right? So it forces you to understand the details of what you're actually planning on doing. But second, it is for outsiders, bankers, business partners, other stakeholders. When we talked about that money that you would go to the bank to borrow, when you come to see me, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, may I please see your business plan? And if you say, well, I don't have a business plan, then I'll say, well, come back to me when you do have a business plan. But also, the business plan is good for any business partners that you may need, other outside stakeholders, so suppliers, you may have, depending on the type of venture you may have key customers who would want to see your business plan before dealing with you, right? But for you, it's probably primarily for your banker. They're going to want to see it before they loan you $100,000, $200,000, $400,000, right? I want to know that you have a plan, that you have a way to actually make money and pay me back. That's the plan. So what's in the business plan? Several things, right? The industry analysis, company description, market analysis, the marketing plan I'm going to talk about separately, the management team and advisors, financial projections. Couldn't remember if I made separate for these or not. All right, so the industry analysis. Let's see, medical practice. Where are we? Medical practice, all right. So a lot of us dental. So dentist in the back, very good. Other practices, not medical, not dental. All right, that's fine. So when I say I would like to see an industry analysis, right? What that is if you're starting a medical practice or a dental practice, I want a summary of that industry, right? What does the medical practice industry look like? What does the dental practice industry look like? Is it growing, shrinking? What are profit rates, profit margins? So how much money can you actually make? And of course, that's going to vary. So I would like a lot of just general information about the industry. The medical practice industry is, and then you give me a couple of pages on it. Second, I want your company description. So in your company description, I want to know about not the whole medical practice field or the whole dental practice field. I want to know about what you're going to do. So what's that include? If you've already started a practice and now you're just putting together your business plan, you'd want to talk about kind of the past history of your company, right? If you're just starting, you want to talk about why you're doing this. So you tell me, why would you want to start your own medical or dental practice? Because you, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say for freedom.
For freedom. Now, what do you mean by freedom?
That, like, I can set schedule like how I want it to be.
Set a schedule how I want it to be. Okay. Why else might we want to start our own practice?
Maybe a true population of people that have struggled making it out to a center.
All right, I want to provide health care for an underserved population. Okay, we can certainly do that. Why else?
Possibly higher income than the employee.
Possibly higher income, right? So some of the numbers that I was able to kind of find for income between when you're an associate at a practice and when you're the owner, I actually found numbers for dental practices. And associates, now these, I'm sure these are just general numbers and there's variance depending on where your practice is, right? But if you're an associate at a practice, somewhere around $100,000 a year. If you own the practice, it's $300,000 or $400,000 a year, right? So it could be a financial incentive. I could make, I'm going to be the Bill Gates of the dental practice world, right? I want to talk for a second about our first reason, though, and that's to set my own schedule. On average, how many hours a week do you think a general entrepreneur spends when they're starting their new business?
Greater than average.
Yeah, it's 80 to 100 hours a week, right? Of course, we think of the regular work week as 40 hours. So you're talking about doubling or more so that. Now we think that, well, that's just to get things up and going, because then once I get things up and going, oh, you know, then it kind of runs itself, yes? No, no. Successful entrepreneurs, 60-hour weeks are pretty typical. Some things do kind of run themselves, but not nearly as much as you would think, right? And we'll get into that actually a little bit more. So I want to know why you want to start this. What's your mission statement? All companies, if you look up any company on their website, you can find their mission statement. Usually they're pretty general boilerplate kinds of things. We want to serve the world in an ethical fashion and you know, treat our stakeholders well. As kind of boilerplate as those sorts of things are, this is it's a necessary thing for you to put together. More important, though, I think, than the mission statement is your mantra. And your mantra is 5 words or less. So you describe what you do and why you do it in 5 words or less. Because nobody can remember what your mission statement is. Right? Everyone can remember 5 words. So for you, you'd have to think 5 words. In 5 words, how do I describe what I do? Well, that's for you to come up with, right? So I want to see your mantra. I want to see the current development status of your business. What licenses have you already got, right? Where are you in terms of looking for location for your practice? Where are you in every aspect of developing your business? That is in the company description. For the market analysis, you're going to talk about your specific target market, and you can talk about this in a couple different ways. One is geographic, right? So we're all here in the beautiful River City, Richmond, Virginia, right? Who's actually from the Richmond area? Just a couple of us, right? Who expects after I graduate and I go to start my practice, I'm starting it somewhere other than Richmond, Virginia? That's probably the majority of us, sure, right? All right, well, I want to know where you're starting it. I want to know the city, I want to know the state, I want to know, I want to know kind of the neighborhood you're thinking of, right? Because I want to know what kind of patients you might be seeing. Because if, for example, here in beautiful Richmond, if you say, I'm starting my practice out in the West End by Short Pump, I go, who lives out by Short Pump? Well, that's a relatively affluent area, right? So I'm going to think, all right, you're probably going to have relatively affluent customers who probably have pretty good insurance, so you'll probably get paid relatively on time, sort of thing. Versus if you say, I'm going to start my practice in beautiful Petersburg. I think, well, Petersburg is a little bit of a different geographic area with different demographics. So that might mean some different things to me. I also want to know about the demographics that you're looking at. And that's going to depend greatly on the type of practice that you have, right? If you want to start a pediatric practice, well, the demographics are all about how many little kids are there in your statistical metropolitan area, in the city that you're looking at, right? What's the growth rate of, 1 to 10-year-olds in your area? Are there more and more little kids being born there? Are there fewer and fewer little kids being born there? So I want to know things like that. Are you going to focus on men or women in your practice, or does that not matter? What's the income level, I think I mentioned, around where you're looking to start your practice? Because income levels tell us a lot about the area. They tell us partly about maybe how viable payments are going to be for you, right? How quickly you're going to get paid. But income level also is associated with things like crime, right? In areas with very low income levels, you see relatively high levels of crime. And if I'm the banker, again, my banker hat on, and you're suggesting to me you're going to open your practice in a high crime area, not that I would say no, but it's an important piece of information for me. It's going to lead me to ask some more questions. I'm going to talk about the marketing plan more specifically in a minute. The management team and your advisors. So who wants to start a solo practice? Maybe. So most of us want to start a group practice then, is that right? I mean, that's what I'm assuming? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Or we haven't really thought about that yet. Group? Right? What are the benefits of starting a solo practice? Or a solo venture? You're the only entrepreneur. You're not starting with a team.
All the money's yours.
All the money is yours. That's a definite benefit, right?
You control all the decisions.
You control all the decisions. I make all the decisions. I don't have to compromise.
You take care of every patient.
I see every patient, right? I make every decision. What's kind of the downside of that?
Risk.
Risk, right? So I have nobody to share financially the risk. I have nobody to share decision-making with. I have nobody for a sounding board. Hey, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? Well, there is nobody there. It's just you, right? So being able to make all the decisions on your own is a great benefit. Having to make all the decisions on your own is a big disadvantage. So if most of us are generally planning on starting with a group, all right, who's in the group? Who's the team? When I say who's the team, I want to know things like, well, I want to know their background. So if you're starting with another group of doctors or dentists, who are they? What's their educational background? What's their previous experience in the industry, if they have any? I want to know what everyone's title is going to be. I want to know the duties and responsibilities that go along with each title. I want to know who's responsible for what in the practice. I want an organization chart, because as much as beneficial as it is to start our new venture or our practice with a team, and there are enormous benefits to doing that, right? There has to be one person who gets the final say. Otherwise, it's just a recipe for conflict. If nobody has the final say, how do we make a decision on something that we disagree about if nobody has the final say, right? So that's like the CEO, essentially, of your practice. Somebody has to have the authority within the organization to say, look, we've talked about this, we've all given our opinions, here's what we're going to do. Right? Typically, that depends on the equity distribution in the organization. So if, for example, if there are 4 of you that start a practice, you might think, hey, it's a good idea that we all start with 25% ownership, right? It sounds good, it sounds equitable. Except then when it comes time to make a decision, when there's conflict, even if you have somebody who's the CEO of your practice, what if 3 of you say, but the 3 of us who own 75% of the equity don't like that decision? So we might consider having one person have more equity in the practice than maybe the others, and they'd be the CEO. But that also means that they have put in more money to start the practice. Right? You don't get more equity just by a draw of straws. You get more equity because you put more money in. So it's something to consider. Right? Also, when you're starting your new venture, how do you decide on who your partners are going to be? So I want to start a practice, me and 3 other people. How do I decide who they are? Go ahead, please.
I think it's a little bit different depending on what business you go into, but I think for medicine, or I guess for general ventures,
Mm-hmm.
you want to pick people that have different skill sets than you, because you want kind of diversity.
Oh, all right, sure. So the research suggests that diverse teams have more conflict in them, of course, because you're coming at a problem from a bunch of different perspectives. But the research also says that they make better decisions at the end. There's more conflict, and it takes longer to make decisions, but the decisions are generally better if you have a diverse group. And that makes sense, right? Should you start with all of your friends? Friends from medical school, we're all getting together to start the practice.
Not going to stay friends.
Ah, right. There's actually been a lot of research on, do I start with friends and family members? Family members, generally no. It's generally a bad idea. It doesn't mean that it can't work. It just means that in general it is problematic. Friends is a little bit more 50-50. So I guess if your friends are really hardworking, really good at what they do, really committed to your venture or practice, then yes, that can work. But what you also see a lot is, well, it's my friend, and they're kind of shirking what they're supposed to be doing. They're not doing their job really, but because they're your friend, I kind of let them slide along. Imagine saying to your friend that the last 10 years, you're fired. I'm firing you. Goodbye. A hard thing to do, right? So if it is a group of friends, that can work, but you have to really think long and hard about the people not as friends, but as co-owners. What would they be as in terms of owning part of this practice with me? And try very hard not to think of them as friends when you're doing that exercise. Are these great friends, but are they people that I'd actually want to run a business with? Also, any advisors that you have. A lot of new ventures will get what they call a board of advisors. And so it's not a board of directors, but it's a group of advisors. So it could be financial advisors. Certainly you'd want to talk with an accountant. You'd want to talk with a lawyer who'd help you through some of these initial steps, right? They'll help you get incorporated and things like that. So who are those people? And you want to give some biography of them as well. Number 6 is financial projections. Of course, we talked about the cash flow statement, income statement, balance sheet. It's not necessary that you understand how to build those. All right? That's what your accountant is for. It is necessary that you understand what the numbers mean. Because if you don't understand what the numbers mean, then how in the world do you know whether your practice is financially viable or not? Our practice has been open for 3 years. Oh, how are you doing? No, I don't know. Well, the accountant's taking care of that. Well, if the accountant is taking care of that, that means they're running your practice, not you. For the marketing plan, you want to think about how will I market and sell my services? Because if you're a dentist or a doctor, certainly people are going to need your services, right? Dental services, or I need to go see my family physician, or I might need to go to see different kinds of doctors for different kinds of conditions, certainly. But how do you position yourself? Because let's say that you wanted to open a practice here in Richmond. My guess would be that in whatever medical or dental specialty you're in, there are already practices like that here. So you already have competition. And it's not enough to say, well, you know, there are a lot of people that need pediatrics. Well, that may very well be true, but that doesn't mean they're coming to see you. Right? You have to think about the big question, why are people going to come to my practice and not the practice that's down the street? How are people going to get to know about me? How are people going to get to know about what we do? How are people going to get to know about the different services we offer? How are people going to get to know about how friendly we are? How empathetic we are to our patients? How understanding we are? That's all about marketing. You also have to think about what specific products or services, in your case, are you going to offer? Are you going to offer a full line of services? Are you going to specialize in a very narrow part of the market? Price, you would have to tell me. I don't know enough about medical and dental practices to know about specific price drivers. It's probably, my guess is, largely determined by insurance companies. That would be my guess. But that there are certainly boutique kinds of practices. We don't take insurance, we only take cash payments. In that case, what kind of pricing model do you use? Certainly that's more of an upscale, prestige sort of practice, so you would be charging significantly more than you'd be getting just from an insurance company, right? So for your marketing plan, some of the things that you can do. Now remember, this is your business. Oh, just a couple minutes? Remember that this is your business. These are things that you need to be involved in. All right? So you need to have a professional online presence. That's how people find you nowadays. And that means a web page, Facebook, could mean Twitter or a blog. It depends on how involved you want to get in that. But at the very least, a professional web page and Facebook page. Professional. You need to be active in the community. That's how people get to know about you, right? You join different community organizations. You might donate services to a local charity. You might have an open house with refreshments and door prizes. Let everyone come in. Hey, look at the beautiful place we have. Oh, it's great to meet you. Become the expert. Anytime there's a news organization, a newspaper, a community organization, and they want a quote or they want to talk to somebody with your specialty, you go, yes, of course I'll do that. I'd be happy to talk with you. You want to increase patient satisfaction. Now, I came across this thing called HEART, which is hospitality, empathy, and enthusiasm, attitude, respect, and timeliness. I don't know if that's anything that you ever hear about, but a good thing to do when you're marketing is to put yourself in the place of your patient, right? What does your patient want from you? And give it to them. Thank you cards that are handwritten are nice for new patients. Thank you. It's been, we're happy to have you in our practice. You might thank referring doctors if that's the case. You can send out birthday cards or emails to your patients. Give out care packages to your patients with, your pen with your practice name on it and the little magnets that go on refrigerators. And lastly, and I'll just go through this in just a minute here, can you be the manager? And this is something only you can answer. If the answer is no, that's okay. If after thinking about it you go, no, I don't want that responsibility, that is okay, right? You want to do what you do best. If what you do best is not running a practice, that's okay. Be an associate, work for a practice. Find a mentor, somebody that already has a practice, and it sounds like you're going to be getting some of that information in the spring. Read all that you can about managing practices. Do not abdicate financial and administrative management to staff. It's your practice. Plan to spend at least 30% of your time running your business, not meeting with patients. And lastly, there's practice management, right? How does my practice make money and what things do we offer versus business management, and that's understanding financials, understanding strategy, understanding planning. You need to know both of these things. And lastly, and I'll finish here, do you like people? Because as the business person running the practice, this is a big part of what you're going to do. You're dealing with people way beyond patients, right? Staff, suppliers, lenders, other stakeholders, right? It's your business. You'll be dealing with them. Do you like that part of the job? And that's it. Any questions? So this is my email. I have some business cards if you want them up here, but this is my email. If you have any questions, if you want any more information, if there's ever anything that I can help you with, even after you graduate from here and you leave and you go wherever you go, if there's ever any way that I can help, I'm more than happy to do it. Thanks for having me.